They called me dead weight. So I gave them the mortgage bill and moved to Florida. I was folding towels in the kitchen when I overheard them. Their voices were hushed, but at my age, I know when people don't want to be heard. "You need to say something," Clara hissed, impatient. "Your mother can't live with us forever. She's not helping. She just takes up space," Michael muttered. "She raised you," I interjected softly. "That's not the point," Clara snapped. "We're stressed with bills, and she just sits all day. She's dead weight." I froze mid-towel. "Dead weight, you heard that?" I said quietly, stepping into the doorway. Clara flinched. Michael's eyes widened. "Mom, that's not what she meant," he sputtered. "It is," I said. "You just didn't think I'd be listening." They said nothing. I returned to folding the last towel with trembling hands, placed it neatly on the stack. My heart beat slow and steady. I had lived through worse than words, but still some words linger. That night at dinner, I spilled a bowl of soup. Arthritis had been cruel lately, and my hand shook as I set it down. "Seriously?" Clara muttered, tossing the hot broth onto her lap. "I'm sorry," I murmured, reaching for a napkin butt. Before I could, she slapped my hand away, then my face. It wasn't the sting, it was the silence that followed. Michael just stood there. He didn't yell. He didn't ask what she thought she was doing. He looked at me, then looked away. In that moment, I realized he wouldn't defend me, not even now. Just then the front door opened. Mom and my youngest daughter, the one I hadn't seen in over a year, stood in the doorway. Suitcase in hand, stunned expression. She had a fresh divorce, I knew, because she called me 3 days ago in tears, unable to breathe. She took in my cheek, the soup spill, me trying to hold myself together. Then she saw Clara and didn't hesitate. "You touch my mother again, and I will break both your hands," Anne said through clenched teeth. Michael jumped up. "What the hell?" he shouted. "You don't live here. You don't get to come in here and play hero." Anne turned slowly. "You let your wife hit Mom and said nothing. You let her call Mom a burden and stood there like a coward." "She's not helping us," he shot back. "She just takes up space, just like you, a divorced parasite who came running back to Mom when life got hard." Anne recoiled, as if he'd struck her too. "You're just like her," he spat. "Both of you. Useless." That's when I stepped between them. "Enough," I said. They froze. I looked at Anne. "You're not useless," then turned to Michael. "And you are not my son anymore." His mouth opened, but no words came. I walked to my chair by the window, the one they said I stared out of like a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was alive, and I was done. I once believed giving would guarantee love. That loyalty, paid in silence, would echo back in warmth. I was wrong. I sold the house I'd lived in since Michael was 9 brick, with peeling paint on the porch and stubborn plumbing. It was mine. Bought with graveyard shifts, thrift sewing, skipped vacations. That house carried me through widowhood, Michael's college years, the harshest winters. When Michael and Clara were expecting their second child, they came to me hopeful. "There's a perfect house, Mom," Michael said. "Good schools, yard, room for all, but we're short on the down payment." Without hesitation. "How much?" He named the number. I wired it within a week. I didn't ask to be on the deed. I didn't want them feeling burdened, just a home for the babies. I told myself they'd understand what it meant. They never did. I moved into their guest room, a space between laundry and garage. No window, a mattress on the floor. But I told myself it was enough. I was near grandkids. I could help. I did help more than they'll ever admit. I watched kids all weekdays, Pickups, drop-offs, fevers, nightmares, homework, bedtime songs. I cooked dinner most nights, washed their clothes, patched torn backpacks. I never asked for thanks. Then one month I saw an envelope on the counter. Final notice. Mortgage due. Michael waved it off. Clara had to leave work early. Things are tight, he said. So I paid it quietly. Month after month, I paid half the mortgage, never mentioned it. Didn't want to embarrass him. Maybe they didn't care. Clara changed, slowly at first little things. Eye rolls when I offered lunch, snapping that my family stories confused the kids. Then bigger things. We need more space, she suggested, when toys spilled the living room. Maybe the guest room could be a playroom. I said nothing, nodded, gathered my knitting. Later I overheard her phone call. She doesn't pay rent, but she eats, uses water, electricity. It adds up. Once she passed me a shopping list. Might be nice if you start picking up your own groceries. I mean, you do eat a lot of yogurt. Michael never said a word. When I looked for comfort, he looked away. The worst part, I kept trying. I baked Clara's favorite bread even after she called my recipes outdated. I folded her laundry when she left it in the washer for days. I sewed buttons on her blouses. She barely noticed. When she did speak, she said, "You're lucky we have space for you. Not every family does." As if the meals, care, love I gave were a favor I owed her. And Michael, my sweet boy who once made macaroni cards, just stood silent beside her. One evening, when I burned the rice, Clara walked into the kitchen, sniffed the air, laughed. "Well, I guess you really are getting old." Michael said nothing. That night I sat on the back steps in the Florida heat, staring at the horizon until it blurred. How many times had I given them the last slice, the warmest blanket, the best of me? I thought of the house I gave up, the porch swing, the daffodils, my name carved in the pantry beside Michael's in messy fourth-grade letters. Gone. Given away. Mothers stay, I told myself, even when treated like furniture, when kindness meets contempt, when your name becomes an inconvenience. But something shifted the moment Clara slapped me, when Michael didn't move. Resolute, I found strength I never thought I had. I called the bank one Tuesday morning, not dramatic. I didn't cry, I just confirmed what I already knew. My name was still listed as payee on the mortgage, even though I wasn't on the deed. They pulled up the file. The woman was polite. Too polite, the way people are when numbers don't add up. "Yes, Mrs. Harper, it seems you've been making partial payments since July, plus a lump sum last December." "That's correct," I said. "Would you like to continue?" "No," I replied. "I want to stop today. Also, forward all future balance and documents to the homeowners, Michael and Clara Harper." She paused, then, "Of course. I'll finalize that today. Please email me confirmation." I hung up. 2 hours later, the bank sent a letter. I printed it, folded it neatly, placed it in an envelope with my final payment receipt. That afternoon, I made lentil soup, Michael's favorite. I baked bread, set 3 plates, and placed the envelope beside the salt shaker. When they came home, I greeted them as if nothing changed. Clara pulled off her heels. Michael had his phone pressed to his ear. Dinner was quiet, cutlery clinking, wall clock ticking. When their plates were nearly empty, I placed the envelope between them. "What's this?" Clara asked without looking up. I wiped my hands on my napkin. "That," I said slowly, "is the last mortgage payment I will ever make." Clara blinked. "Excuse me?" I turned to her. "I called the bank this morning, told them to send all future communications to you two. Responsibility is yours now." Her mouth opened. but no sound emerged. Michael looked up. "Mom, I heard you," he said. I turned to Clara. "You called me dead weight." She scoffed. "That's not," I interrupted. "It is. And now I'm removing the weight." Michael's face reddened. His eyes dropped to the table. "I've paid this house for 3 years, half the mortgage, the down payment, groceries, repairs. I've cooked your meals, raised your children, stayed silent when you rolled your eyes at me." I reached down, lifted my small suitcase from beside my chair, set it upright. "But now," I said, "the givers are done giving." Clara stood abruptly, voice rising. "You can't just leave. What about the kids?" "You're wrong," I replied. "I can and I am." Michael looked like a boy again, one who'd done something wrong and didn't know how to undo it. "Mom, let's just talk." I turned to, "You let her hit me," I said softly. "You let her call me." And I left those words hanging between us. "You called my daughter trash when she defended me. And still, you stood by her every time, even knowing she was wrong." His eyes filled with tears, but no words came. "I'll be gone in the morning," I said. "You'll have your keys back. You can turn the guest room into whatever you want." "Where will you go?" he whispered. I smiled. "Somewhere I'm not dead weight." I rolled my suitcase to the bottom of the stairs, climbed slowly, and packed the rest of my things. A few sweaters, a photo album, and my late husband's watch. That night, I slept soundly, heavier than I had in years. Before the sun rose, I made myself a final cup of coffee in their kitchen. I left the house key on the counter, no note. No goodbye, just the quiet click of the door and the long walk toward freedom. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. I packed only what I needed, enough clothes for a week. My birth certificate, pension papers, my mother's handwritten recipes, and a photo of Michael and Anne as toddlers, their faces sticky from watermelon. The house key rested beside a slowly cooling cup of coffee, one last habit performed out of routine. At 5:40 a.m., I rolled my little suitcase down the street toward the bus stop, the wheels clicking gently against the pavement. The air was still. The morning hushed. A neighbor was watering his lawn. I waved. He waved back, unaware I was leaving for good. The Greyhound was half full. The vinyl seats were cracked, the air stale but not unkind. I sat by the window and watched the city shrink, the city where I'd lived like a ghost in someone else's home. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. We passed through the slow hills of Georgia into the warm breath of the South. Hours drifted by. I ate saltines from my pocket, jotted a few lines in my journal, and watched the endless fields roll past. I thought of Anne, my youngest, the one I hadn't seen in over a year. She lived in Sarasota now. Last time we spoke, she whispered into the phone, "I think I'm done. I just don't know how to leave him." I knew that voice. I had once used it myself. When I arrived, the Florida air felt different, softer despite the heat. I stepped off the bus into sunlight and swaying palms, my suitcase bumping behind me like an old companion. Anne lived just outside town in a modest apartment complex. I walked the final blocks to her building beige walls, chipped railings, cracked sidewalk. I climbed the stairs and knocked. When she opened the door, she froze. "Mom," she breathed. She looked thinner than I remembered. Tired eyes, lips swollen beneath faded makeup. She'd always been good at hiding bruises. Her wedding ring was gone. So was mine. We stood silently, just looking. Two women worn down from keeping quiet too long. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. No words, just warmth. The kind of hug you give when something deep inside finally breaks free. I held her like that for a long time. There was no need to explain. We both had survived homes where love had strings attached, where silence was safer than truth, where staying meant slowly losing yourself. Inside her apartment was a small space second-hand furniture, a rattling air conditioner that sounded like it might give up any second. But it was clean, and it felt real. "I was just making tea," Anne said, wiping her eyes. I nodded and sat at the kitchen table. She poured me a cup. No questions like, "Why are you here?" or "What happened?" She simply placed the cup in front of me, sat across, and reached for my hand. We sat like that. No explanations, no apologies, just two women who had finally come home to each other. Anne didn't speak much those first days. She moved like she was always bracing for something, for someone. She flinched when her phone buzzed, kept her back to the windows, locked every door twice, even in her own home. I didn't press. I folded laundry while she worked late shifts. I cooked soup and left little notes by her coffee mug. I swept the floors, and I waited. One evening, as soft rain tapped on the windows and we sat on her worn couch, she finally said it. "He calls me garbage." I turned, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "He says it even when we're not fighting. When I forget the trash, when dinner's late, when I speak too softly or too loudly, when I just breathe wrong." Her hands were clenched, knuckles white. "He took my car keys last month, said I didn't deserve to leave, said even my own mother wouldn't want me." She looked up, then eyes filled with something deeper than sadness. "Was he right?" My throat tightened. I reached for her trembling hand, so different from the little fingers I used to braid hair for. "He's wrong," I said. "He's always been wrong." Her lip trembled, and she tried to speak, but couldn't. Instead, she broke down and sobbed into my lap like a child. I stroked her hair the same way I had during thunderstorms when she was 5. That night, she told me everything. The bruises weren't accidents. He checked her phone every night. He once made her kneel for an hour for buying the wrong milk. She stopped laughing 2 years ago and hadn't even realized. I didn't cry. I held her. And when the tears stopped, I whispered, "If you can't leave yet, I'll carry you out myself." She didn't reply, just leaned into me. Over the following weeks, we slowly unraveled her old life. She started saving cash in a hidden envelope. We made a checklist, what she'd need, what to say, who to call. But fear doesn't leave easily. One morning, she whispered, "I'm 39. I'm tired. What if I fail?" I held her hands. "You're not starting over," I said. "You're picking up where someone else tried to end you." Something inside her shifted. She stood straighter, smiled not often, but genuinely, stopped glancing at the window every hour. Then one Sunday, she stood in the doorway, holding a thick envelope with shaking hands. "Divorce papers," she said. "I signed them." I held my breath. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "It's time." I hugged her tightly. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," I replied. "We saved each other." In her freedom, I found mine too. We found the apartment by chance, above a seafood shop near the beach. The paint peeled, the plumbing was moody, but the windows caught the sunrise like they were made for it. Anne stood in the doorway, lease in hand, eyes full of wonder. "Can we really do this?" "We already are," I told her. We moved in a week later, just the essentials. A few clothes, a kettle, 2 folding chairs, and a second-hand sofa that smelled faintly of cinnamon. We didn't bring the past, just the parts of ourselves we were learning to love again. Our days found rhythm. Anne sold handmade jewelry online, something she'd done as a hobby in college. I helped with packaging, learning the tools and codes. We turned a corner of the living room into a workspace boxes, twine, tissue paper. Every sale felt like a small win. I began baking again. Cookies, banana bread, soft butter rolls. We posted pictures and started taking local orders. They called us mother and daughter goods. The name stayed. We didn't earn much, but we didn't need much. Each morning I rose with the sun, brewed tea, and wrote in my journal. Not to remember, but to let go. Page after page of all I'd held inside. The heartbreak, the quiet fading of hope, but also the joy. The sunlight on Anne's shoulders, the salt in the morning air. Her laughter reel unforced returning slowly. She brought home seashells and postcards, painted small frames, hung them on the walls. We ate on the floor rice, vegetables, sometimes a fish with lemon. We played soft music, talked about books and nothing at all. We never spoke of Michael or Clara or that house. We didn't need to. One night, I was closing my journal and preparing for bed. I looked at Anne. She was asleep on the sofa, head tilted back, arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips. She was dreaming not the fearful kind, but the peaceful kind, the kind of sleep that only comes when you finally feel safe. Watching her, I felt something in me shift. I knew why. The phone rang that night. There was no tightness in my chest, just the sound of it, sharp and sudden on a Tuesday. I almost let it ring through. I was holding an egg. Loon was in the kitchen, quietly humming as she stirred a pot of soup. I stood by the window, trimming dry leaves from the basil plant. The screen lit up an area code I recognized, but a number I hadn't seen in months. I answered without knowing why. "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my chest tightening. There was a silence. Then she whispered, "Grandma, Mom and Dad, they're scared." She mentioned a letter from the bank. Something about foreclosure. I lowered myself into a chair, slowly. "Dad's been crying," she said, her voice barely a breath. "They were fighting. I heard him say, they're going to lose the house." Another pause. "He said it was yours first." I didn't reply. Then the line clicked. She had passed the phone. "Mom?" It was Michael, his voice older, unsteady. He hadn't called me Mom since the day I left. "I'm sorry," he said all at once. "I should have stopped her. I should have said something. I was scared. I thought we had time." "Why are you calling me now?" I asked, my voice quiet, not unkind. He didn't answer right away. "I need help," he said at last. "We need help. We're losing the house. I tried to fix it. It's too late, and I know I don't deserve to ask. But please, come back. We'll make space for you again, Clara." I gave a small laugh, soft and sad. He fell silent. I took a deep breath, looked around the apartment, lavender in the air, lemon oil on the counters, thin walls, but the warmth held. "Michael," I said gently, "do you remember when Clara called me dead weight?" He drew a breath, sharp. "Yes. Do you remember what you did?" Silence. "Nothing," I answered for him. "You did nothing. And then you called your sister a leech. You stood there. And now, months later, I exist again because the bank knows my name too." He sobbed once. "Mom, please." I closed my eyes. "I was a burden to you then," I said, "but I'm not anymore." And then I said it. Not to wound, but because it was true. I used to carry that house. Now I carry myself. He sniffled. "What do I tell the kids?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Tell them their grandmother is doing just fine, and maybe one day they'll understand what you never did." I hung up. No promises, no goodbyes, just peace. Some mornings, Anne and I walk barefoot along the shoreline. She always carries her sandals, though she never puts them on. I bring my journal, though some days it stays closed. We just walk side by side, letting the tide kiss our feet, letting the wind take the rest. The ocean has its own rhythm, a kind of quiet forgiveness. Not for others, for ourselves. We don't speak much on those walks. We don't need to. And Lolo is finding her way too. She laughs now, not loudly, but it's real. She hums when she rinses dishes. The bruises have faded, though you can still see their ghost in her eyes. As for me, I tend herbs on the balcony. I send handwritten recipes to strangers on our baking page. I sleep peacefully. I make tea in the morning, and I enjoy every single sip. Last week a letter arrived, a real one, with a stamp. A heart drawn next to my name. It was from Lily. She wrote it herself. "Dear Grandma," it began, "I hope you're happy." She said she missed the smell of my cookies. She missed my hugs. She told her parents. Her mother cried. Her father went outside. She hoped to see me again. Love, Lily. She'd drawn us holding hands, 2 stick figures, a house behind us, a big smile on my face. I held that letter for a long time, its edges wrinkled, the ink uneven, like she'd tried very hard not to mess it up. The S in hugs was backward, the G in Grandma too big for the line. I didn't cry right away. Her voice was so clear, so small. I just sat in the sun patch by the window breathing. I read it again, slowly, line by line. Then I folded it, pressed it to my chest, left it on the windowsill. But later that night, when the apartment had quieted and Anne was asleep, blanket tucked to her chin, breath steady, I read it again. And this time I cried. Not from grief, from release. Tears for everything I'd held in, for every time I bit my tongue, for the look on Michael's face when he said nothing, for the silence I thought was strength. I cried for Lily too, because children carry what adults refuse to. But I didn't regret leaving. That's the difference between grief and guilt. Grief says, I miss what I loved. Guilt says, I should have stayed. I had carried both. That night I let one go. The next morning I rose early, boiled water, sliced lemons, poured Anne a cup of tea she'd find when she woke. Then I sat at our little kitchen table and wrote back. Dear Lily, I began, I miss you too. I told her my cookies still smelled the same, that I was growing basil and lavender, that I sometimes bake cinnamon bread just for the smell. I told her about the soft beach and pushy seagulls that always beg for toast. I didn't mention the house, or her parents. That wasn't hers to carry. She's a child. Children deserve to feel wanted, not caught between adult shame and silence. I sealed the letter, tucked in a pressed violet I'd picked on a walk, wrote her name in my best script, even as my hands trembled a little when I dropped it in the mailbox. I thought of all I had left behind, and all I had reclaimed, my voice, my dignity, my place. For years I had shrunk myself, apologized for existing, believed that being needed was love. But it isn't. Love doesn't bruise. It doesn't hiss names in the dark. It doesn't slap your hand for spilling soup. It doesn't call you dead weight in a room you paid for. Love stays. Love speaks. Love sees. And now, I walk in the sunlight with my daughter beside me, and every step we take is loud. Lolo sells tiny jars of sand and poems on cards. People buy them, not because they need to, but because they feel her heart in them. She sings while she cooks, often off-key. We laugh so hard we can't finish our food. We planted rosemary last weekend. She said it was for protection. I told her she doesn't need protecting anymore. She has herself and me. Sometimes we sit on the porch and play old records. She reads me articles from her phone. I tell her stories I was once too afraid to share. I lived like a shadow, apologizing for my presence. Now I take up space boldly. My laughter fills the room. My memories are sacred, because I matter. I was never a burden. And if anyone ever says otherwise, that's their weight, not mine. Years passed, and our little seaside apartment became more than a shelter. It became a launch pad. Anne and I didn't just survive. We lived. We said yes to things we once feared. We took road trips, just a paper map, cinnamon coffee, and the radio turned low. We drove through quiet towns with slanted porches, through hills wrapped in fog. We saw wildflowers in the Smokies, walked mossy sidewalks in Savannah. One time, on a whim, we flew to Oregon just to see the lavender bloom. Rows and rows of purple, reaching for the sky. We laughed in motels with leaky sinks, danced under gas station lights, took blurry photos with strangers, fell asleep under stars, far from anyone who knew our names. We weren't healing. We were blooming. We became women who kept stories, not excuses. Each town, Anne brought a new sketchbook. I brought my journal. We wrote who we'd become, not what we'd lost. She drew shadows and sun. You don't have to raise your voice. Wisdom doesn't need to shout, it waits, it watches. And when the moment is right, it speaks. So speak, even if it's just to the pages of your journal, even if the only evidence is in what you do. Say what you once thought was unspeakable. I am not unseen. I am not here for your convenience. I am not something to simply endure. You are not a visitor in your own life. You are the one writing it. So write endings that make you proud. Write boundaries that don't bend for guilt. Write silences that thunder louder than any cruel word whispered behind a closed door. If they only reach out when the bills pile up. If they only call when they need saving. If they only recognize your worth once you've been emptied. Then let your stillness be your answer. Let your absence teach the lesson they refuse to learn. And if they weep, let it not be because they miss you, but because they miss what they never deserved in the first place. Here's the truth. Some people never say sorry. Some never admit to the harm they've done, but they still hear the sound of you leaving. And that echo, it's louder than anything you could have shouted. To every woman who's ever been labeled a burden, to every mother erased from the story, to every grandmother pushed aside, to every wife replaced out of convenience, to every daughter who stood between harm and her mother when no one else would. I see you, I believe you, and I honor what you've carried all this time. Let the guilt remain with those who earned it. You carry only peace. Share this if you've ever been pushed out of the frame, if you were told to make yourself small, if you kept quiet when you deserved to be heard, and still chose to rise. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories for more tales of quiet power, deep love, and endings that don't beg for applause. Just dignity. Because some women don't shatter. They rebuild, and this time they don't ask for permission.